Chuck Adams sat in the back of a worn-out cab, his guitar case leaning against his leg. His fingers, calloused from years of strumming, drummed nervously against the faded leather. At 42, he was not the typical AGT contestant. He wasn't young, he wasn't polished, and he wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing something far more personal. For the last decade, Chuck had been performing in small-town bars and open mics, often singing to rooms where no one was listening. His wife, Laura, had always been his anchor. She believed in him when he had given up on himself. But a year ago, cancer took her away, leaving Chuck with only her words echoing in his heart, "Promise me, if you ever get the chance, you'll sing where the world can hear you." The cab slowed as the bright lights of the AGT stage came into view. Chuck's throat tightened. This wasn't just a performance. It was a promise kept, a tribute to love lost, and a desperate attempt to feel whole again. When his name was called, Chuck walked out onto the massive stage. The audience was restless, murmurs rippled through the crowd. A middle-aged man with a weathered face and simple attire wasn't what they expected. "How are you, Chuck?" one of the judges asked. He smiled faintly. "I'm nervous. But this song means everything to me. It's a piece of my heart. What are you singing for us today?" Chuck swallowed hard. "Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls. It was my wife's favorite song." There was a pause, and even the judges softened. The spotlight dimmed as Chuck sat on a stool, his guitar resting on his lap. The first strum filled the auditorium, raw and imperfect, yet hauntingly beautiful. His voice cracked at the start, low, husky, trembling with vulnerability. But as he pushed through, something shifted. The grief in his tone became a river, sweeping the audience into his pain, his love, and his loss. Every lyric wasn't just sung, it was lived. By the chorus, the room was utterly silent. No whispers, no distractions, just thousands of people leaning into his world. As the second verse rose, Chuck closed his eyes. He saw Laura sitting in the front row, smiling with that quiet encouragement she always carried. For a fleeting moment, she felt alive again, breathing through his music. The audience felt it too. A woman in the front row wiped her tears. A father squeezed his daughter's hand. Strangers leaned into each other as if Chuck's pain belonged to everyone. The judges exchanged glances, visibly moved. Simon Cowell's usually stern face softened, while Sofia Vergara blinked back tears. And then came the climax. Chuck's voice rose higher than he ever thought possible, breaking but soaring, raw yet divine. His guitar chords thundered beneath his words, and his final cry of, "I just want you to know who I am," was not just a lyric, it was a plea. The song ended with silence. Not the awkward kind, but the kind where breath is held, where hearts forget to beat. Then, the explosion came. The entire audience erupted, standing to their feet. The applause was thunderous, but Chuck sat still, clutching his guitar, overwhelmed by the presence of his wife's spirit in that very moment. "Chuck," Heidi Klum started, her voice trembling, "I don't think I've ever been so moved by a performance. You weren't just singing, you were telling us your soul's story." Sophia added, tears in her eyes, "You made us all feel like we knew her, like we were part of your love. That's what music is supposed to do." Howie Mandel leaned forward. "Most people come here to chase fame. You came here to honor someone you love, and in doing that, you gave us something unforgettable. That was beyond beautiful." The audience roared in agreement. Then Simon leaned back in his chair. He was quiet for a long moment, the weight of his silence felt across the room. Finally, he spoke, "I've been doing this for a long time. Rarely do I hear something so honest that it stops me in my tracks. You may not realize it, but tonight, you touched millions of people who needed to feel what you just gave us. That was more than a performance, it was a gift." The golden lights of the stage glowed on Chuck as the crowd kept standing, clapping, cheering his name. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. Backstage, Chuck set his guitar down gently. His hands trembled, but his heart was steady. A producer handed him tissues, and he laughed through tears. "Guess I needed that more than I thought," he said. He stepped outside the studio later that night, where the cool air met his damp face. He looked up at the stars, the same stars he and Laura used to gaze at from their porch. "I kept my promise," he whispered. He imagined her smiling, whispering back, "I know." For Chuck Adams, AGT wasn't just a competition. It was a healing, a resurrection of his voice, and a bridge between earth and heaven. His rendition of "Iris" wasn't about hitting notes or impressing judges, it was about bearing a soul scarred by love and loss, and in that vulnerability, finding connection with millions. As he walked away from the studio, fans already calling his name, Chuck realized something: he hadn't just sung for Laura. He had sung for everyone who had ever lost, loved, and longed. And in that shared humanity, he was no longer alone.